Today on Market Vision, we're going to talk about federal debt sustainability. I get a lot of questions about federal debt sustainability, deficit spending by the government, concerns that if the government continues to spend the way it is, that our great-grandchildren are going to somehow be in abject poverty or debtor's prison. Here's the mathematical argument for the government being able to spend more today and repay it more easily tomorrow. First of all, you and I operate on a shorter time frame than the federal government does. First of all, we have birth certificates, and one day we'll each have a death certificate. We don't get out of this life alive. Federal government has a birth certificate, Constitution, Bill of Rights, things like that. There's no death certificate. In theory, continues on ad infinitum. And so the federal government operates with a much longer time horizon than we do. We would want to be debt-free at some point. We would want to have, our mortgage paid off, our loans paid off, those kinds of things. The federal government doesn't operate that way. The federal government can simply perpetually refinance debt. Now, refinance debt at what kind of interest rate? What do those interest payments do to the budget at the time? Those are all very important questions. But at its root, borrowing money today and repaying it far down the road, 30, 40, 50, 60 years down the road, is a reasonably smart idea for the federal government, so long as those funds are going into improving our way of doing life. I would personally be far more comfortable with things like a large infrastructure spending bill than I would seeing corporate bailouts to too big to fail organizations and institutions. That doesn't make much sense to me. The way that the government is able to sustain this debt long term is because over time, it's cheaper for them to pay it back. Because if you think about it mathematically this way, if you borrow $1 trillion today and GDP grows, let's say, by 2.5% to 3%, and inflation is at 2.5% to 3%, then the future cost of paying that debt back is dropping at a rate of 5% to 6% per year. Now, it's important that you get GDP growth, not shrinkage. It's important that you get inflation, not deflation, in that process, in that equation. And as you'll see, you've often seen, even in really good times or really bad times, the federal government always does whatever is needed to create inflation. Why? Because that's the protective barrier for politicians to make sure that even if the GDP isn't growing, at least we're getting inflation, and so at least the money that we've borrowed is going to be worth a little less tomorrow, and we'll be a little more able to afford to pay it back tomorrow. So that's inflation and GDP growth are the two crucial issues in that process. That's why federal government spending, although it is a concern, it's not a systemic threat today, especially in the face of ultra low interest rates, because we're financing these tens of trillions of dollars worth of debt at the federal level at historically low interest rates. Now, should interest rates balloon, it will be the interest rate line item in the federal budget becomes a much larger hurdle and creates future pinch on the budget, that's for sure, but we're not there yet. And this is the argument for federal government spending being sustainable, at least in the near term. It's not time to panic on that front at this stage. We here at Visionary Wealth Management are always here with perspective for the decisions ahead. If you have a question, feel free to call anytime. Have a great week.